this actually segues into our first speaker for the night. We have Ms. Jennifer Smith Izzo, who is actually an instructor of environmental science for the Cordon Bleu Online at the Phoenix Art Institute. She's a board member of the Green Cave Creek leading annual Earth Day celebration, and she has a degree in environmental science from the George Washington University, and get this, a master's in management as well as an MBA dual program from right here. So, a fellow alum, as well as Arizona State University. Let me just flip the page here. It's getting a little awkward. University West in 2000, and has completed a certificate in sustainability leadership from the University of California, Irvine. So, yes, thank you, sir. So we're very comfortable with knowing that we have very competent speakers in the field of food and sustainability. Speaking to Jennifer over the past few weeks, she's actually been very adamant about coming here once again. She has spoken on the campus before. She's prepared her speech to give you a little bit of a bigger picture as to what the problem really is and what hidden cues there are for each of us to act upon ourselves. And I think she has some props to work with as well, so maybe you'll get a piece of that as action too. All right, so without further ado, Ms. Jennifer Smith Izzo.
Hello, is this on? Okay. So they took away the podium, so I'm going to try to manage all this here. All right, so as the introduction was, I am an instructor at the Art Institute of Phoenix. The Art Institute is very close by. It's on 23rd and Dunlap, and it's a school that focuses on design, media, arts, fashion, and culinary. And they do have a bachelor's program, and I am hence the science teacher in that school. I teach environmental science, and I also have gone to, let's say I graduated from Thunderbird in 2000, so some years ago. I'm going to be speaking to you tonight on producing enough food for the world, so kind of the background information to why some of these things are happening right now in the world. So I'm going to, hope I'm going to do this right. Do I have to, is it plugged in? Okay. Okay, so first slide that I have here just shows an overall look at how population is growing. So we know that our population is going to continue growing on into the next couple hundred years, up and up and up. Some regions of the world are going to have more growth than others. And clearly you can see that Asia is really taking the majority of the population there, as well as Latin America and Africa. So these are definitely some of the areas that the nonprofit that this dinner is working with tonight are really focusing on. That's not to say we don't have hungry here in the United States, but definitely it's more of an issue in these areas. As their population grows, it will continue to be a problem. One of the big issues that we speak about with this is how do we grow enough food to feed the hungry? So that's what we're going to be looking at in just a second. So again, most of the growth in the world's population is in the developing regions, and this is going to continue on into the future as the population grows. This is a slide that shows which areas of the world have the most malnutrition, and those areas in red are really the areas that are the focus for many of these different international aid programs. So those are the areas that definitely need a lot of attention, let's say, or more attention. All right, so how does this fit into what I teach with environmental science? Well, population growth is always an important factor in this, because the more the population grows, the more pressures we have on our environmental resources. And this map just is showing you where we're growing food around the world. This is the arable land around the world, and we've pretty much capped out on all the land that can be farmed. And so what started happening about, I would say 60, 70 years ago, is that we started looking at how to increase the production of our existing farms instead. And we did this through different forms of technology. Go next. And this is just another map showing what kind of crops that we are growing and how they're distributed around the world. And you can see that there's 3 main crops that are listed here, and I'm going to get back to this in just a moment, but we have really focused our food production around the world on 3 main crops, being corn and wheat and rice. And this is kind of a staple crop for most people for what they include in their diet. All right, if we can go on to the next. So how do we increase how much food that you can make on 1 acre of food? And this is where some of the new technologies have come forward in the last years. So on to the next. I think I put some animations in here. So we've got mechanization, and that should be pretty clear. So moving away from doing things by hand and by using types of tractors and whatnot. Improved irrigation, different types of chemicals between fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, and then biotech. Okay, the next one. So with mechanization, obviously, like I said, different types of tractors. And our tractors are getting better and better and better, so we can produce more food per acre. Some of these tractors now are so high-tech, they have some type of a GPS in them, and they will the farmer doesn't even drive them anymore. All they do is, hang out on Google or whatever, and the thing drives itself, and it is exact, it's precise. It tells them exactly where to turn so they hit every single grain on the field. So we're really increasing production of food with mechanization as well. And then irrigation has definitely improved over the last few decades to be much more efficient. And where it used to be where they would just flood an area and then they started putting out some sprinklers, I'm sure you've seen these around. Now it's even getting more high-tech with drip irrigation systems. So this is a way to really focus on crops and get them to grow faster, grow better, so we can increase production of food. Technology is another factor too that's really improved over the last, I'd say 50 years. The one image that looks like a satellite imagery, this is like a remote sensor, very interesting new technology where they can see where areas of the soil need to be fertilized. So they can focus on those areas specifically, and they won't have to waste putting fertilizers on different areas of the soil that don't need it. So this is also a way to increase production and productivity, and it's just much more efficient. The other part of the slide there shows how much we have increased, though, the usage of fertilizer, especially as population grows, so they're directly related. All right. So chemicals as well, we've been using a lot of chemicals on growing food in the last 50 years, and this is definitely, though, it hasn't been without its repercussions. So with all the chemicals, they've been very welcomed by many farmers because they do increase yield, especially when you don't have a fungus taking over your crop or some kind of a root worm, for example. So they've been quite welcomed into the industry to increase productivity and also just to reduce risk, because if you are focusing your livelihood on farming and you have some sort of a bug that comes in and destroys your crop, this has not only destroyed the crop that's available for your community, but also all of your income as well. So they've been very welcomed, but as we've seen through time, and that's part of science, that things we don't always get the information feedback right away. It takes some time. We have seen that all these chemicals are not always a good thing. They end up having their downsides as well. So we've seen poisonings and all sorts of other things going on. Something called bioaccumulation, where these chemicals are building up in our own systems and causing us to have health problems, other environmental issues as well. All right, to the next. This is just another form of technology that we're experimenting with recently called aquaponics. It's a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics to grow food, and there are several of them that exist around town here, even in Phoenix, but another way to grow food in a different type of an environment, let's say. So where they use tilapia fish to run it through a system and grow different types of crops. So we're experimenting with new forms of technology, let's call it. Okay? So what about genetically modified foods? This is another form of increasing productivity of food that is underneath the category of biotech. This is a very controversial area, and you will probably see all sorts of advertisements out there in magazines that say the only way to continue to grow food and grow enough food to feed the world is through this technology. I would take that comment, it's very out there and advertised, a bit with a grain of salt. I think it's a little bit too optimistic, maybe you could say, and of course they want to say that to get you to buy their food, but actually you're probably all buying it no matter what. We have no labeling laws here in the United States, so about 70% of the food that you eat is bioengineered. And again, we have very, very little labeling laws here, but and there's very little research done to see what kind of impact that this actually has on human health, as well as the long-term impacts on the environment. There's been no research done on it. So I am not a fan of genetically engineered food, and I think most of the studies that I've been doing and researching over the last years have shown that this is not really the answer to the world's food problems. There are some better solutions out there. It's not just about technology. Many people turn first to technology to solve problems, but what we're finding is that technology often creates new problems, and those problems are even more complex to solve. So, all right, the next one. So with what's been going on over the last 50 plus years with our agriculture, we have increased production. We have been able to create more food to feed the world. So we have two things going on. We have the population growth, and then we also have more food being produced. So where's the gap? What's going on there? Why do we still have hungry people? And we've made just major improvements in how many hours it takes to cultivate crops, as well as how many farmers there are out there supporting. Right now in the United States, we use one farmer to feed every 140 people. We actually have more people in our prison systems than we do have farmers here in the United States. So those farmers have very important jobs. So the question is, though, with all of these improvements and that there is enough food out there, why are people still starving? And this typically has to do more with distribution than anything. There is enough food out there, and we are creating enough food. And we've been given all these kind of statistics out there. Food production needs to double in the next 10 years to feed our growing population. Who puts out those statistics? That's something that you should really be questioning. Is that really true? Is it the biotech companies that are saying that because they want you to put more, invest in them and that type of thing? So really question if that is really true and who puts out the information, who's doing the research, what kind of statistics are they putting out there to make that those claims? Because again, I really question them. Okay. All right. So. This is just some interesting data on, again, how much grain production has increased over the last decades. We do have lots of grain out there, and grain is one of those staples that can help feed the hungry, but it's not the grain that you would typically think of with your Wonder Bread, okay? Not the white wheat that we typically see here in our menus. That grain does not have a lot of nutritional value to it. And so if we're growing all this grain and grain production is increased, again, why are people starving? Because we're feeding it all to livestock. 70% of all the livestock in the world, I said that wrong. 70% of all the grain in the world is actually being fed to livestock, okay? That includes beef, that includes chicken, that includes also dairy cattle, for example. So we are putting a lot of that food out there into the production of our livestock. Is that the best way to do it? Okay, to the next one. So if you take a look at the breakdown of what kind of grams of protein that are the distribution of grams of protein, let's say, throughout the different continents, we see that, for example, in North America and Europe, we get a very large portion of our protein from beef. About 25% of the protein that you get on a daily basis comes from animals, while in other countries that's much lower. All right? So we have been told here in the United States, though, that don't eat bread, it's bad for you, Atkins diet, low carbs, eat lots of beef, right? Has everybody heard that before? That's the diet to get skinny, bread makes you fat, we have obesity here in the United States because we eat too much bread. Is that really what's going on, or are there some other issues going on here? Is the bread that we do eat good quality bread? What kind of grain is it made out of? Have we gone against the grain, I guess you could say, in many ways, with the quality of bread that we produce here? What about Wonder Bread? Is it good for you? How many grams of protein does a slice of Wonder Bread have in it? And that seems to be the choice bread of most Americans. One slice of Wonder Bread only has about 1.5 grams of protein in it. You need about 55 grams of protein per day to be nourished. Okay, so that's a lot of bread just to get your protein. So of course you would turn to, you'd be turning to your beef, like a small piece of beef, a couple of ounces, creates about 7 grams of protein per ounce, I think it is. So you can see where many people do turn to eating meat and animal products for their protein because the other carbohydrates are not giving it to them. And then they have other things in them too, like high fructose corn syrup and all these other ingredients. So what I'm questioning here, though, is if we ate good bread and we focused on good quality grains and also used these good quality grains around the world to help feed the hungry and not feeding all the grain to our livestock, what kind of results could this have in feeding the hungry? And I'm pretty sure that it could make a huge contribution, let's say, by just cutting back on beef. And I know that most people don't want to hear that. Oh, I can't eat bacon for breakfast and a ham sandwich for lunch and then a steak for dinner. It's not good for you, okay? There's a reason why we have high cholesterol here in the United States. It's because you're eating too much animal product. If you actually turn to more complex carbohydrates that had high quality in them, like rye, bulgur, spelt, millet, some of these other grains, which you're saying, what? What's that grain? Never heard of that before. Amaranth, they have very high levels of protein in them. So for example, a slice of bread that is made from, let's say cracked wheat, okay, actually has about 4 grams of protein in it. So Wonder Bread was 1.5 grams, cracked wheat is 4 grams, and you throw some nuts in there and it actually goes up to about 6 grams. So you're just a little bit below that slice of beef, and it's not going to have all those other things in it that will damage your health. Okay, so if we can move on to the next one. So again, throwing in a combination of these grains and growing these grains around the world, and instead of focusing on just plain white wheat, which is what we're really growing around the world now. And I showed you that map earlier that had the rice, the wheat, and the corn. If we start focusing more on a variety of grains and keeping those available to the people that need them, and they have high quality nutrients in them, fats as well and proteins, this can actually help decrease that gap that we were discussing earlier. All right. And then the last thing I wanted to mention here, besides reducing beef intake and looking more into better quality grains, is food waste. We really waste a lot of food here in the United States and in most of Northern Europe as well. And so between Americans and Europeans, we are wasting so much food between food scraps, for example, when you're cooking, and then you have on top of that leftovers that you didn't eat when you went to the Cheesecake Factory and didn't realize that your plate was going to be enough to feed 4, and you bring it home and then you put it in the back of the fridge and you forgot it, and then it's moldy, that kind of thing. So there's lots and lots of food waste. And I have some background in the culinary industry, also massive amounts of food waste. At the end of the night, what's going to happen with all this buffet food? Anybody have an idea? What? Do you get a doggy bag? Okay. So typically what happens is that, I mean, they can bring it back to where it has been cooked and they could refrigerate it as long as it stays under the right temperature, but often this is not what happens and it just goes right into the garbage. I've been working with some culinary schools over the last years and massive amounts of food waste because they're practicing cooking and then at the end of the night they all get to taste a little and then it all goes in the garbage. So we have massive amounts of food waste. If we could find a way to creatively reduce that food waste, and I think I found an interesting statistic on that between the average European and North American, between all the food waste that we create among those two groups of people, that's enough food to feed sub-Saharan Africa. So we have some definite work to do in this category as well. Okay? All right, so just to sum up, you can help. We have obviously ways to help with joining with international and nonprofit groups, and we're going to hear some more about some business ideas and other ways that you can help. But just at home, what can you do at home? Cut back on how much animal product you eat, and that does not mean that you're going against your Atkins diet, and that's really a horrible diet, just to mention, okay, it's really not good for you, but it does not mean that you're going to become obese because you're not eating lean beef every day. You can switch over to some more high quality grains instead, and I've actually brought some samples for you to try, and I will be passing them around of a high quality bread that is made with quinoa and buckwheat and lentils. And it is a much better quality bread that can help support the hungry because it has high quality protein and fats in it. So, and then lastly, don't waste food. Those are the two things that you can do personally besides working with, again, some of these organizations that we're talking about tonight, as well as some of the future business endeavors that you can be participating in or ideas coming up with as entrepreneurs. So Stacy is going to walk around to the tables, and working at the Art Institute, I work with many students that are quite visual and sensory, so it's always good to have a prop. So she'll be walking around with a sample of bread, and don't waste it, okay? So. All right, thank you very much.